And welcome to our community. Susie Thomas with you this morning. What a treat. We have got Wanda Brunstetter with us. She is an author with Barber Publishing and one of the co-authors of Amish Front Porch. And also we're going to get to talk about a Christmas cookbook that's coming up as well. Good morning, Wanda.
Good morning. My pleasure to be here.
Well, we love it when people who don't necessarily live in our community, but certainly seem to know a lot about it and certainly have an impact upon it, are able to visit with us. And this is kind of one of those days. Tell me a little bit about why you would write about an Amish front porch.
Because I've sat on many Amish front porches and enjoyed the conversation that went on and the stories that my Amish friends have shared with me about their lives and about the Amish way of life particularly. And just their everyday lives. We talk about many things. So we sometimes share prayer requests. I mean, they're just my good friends, and it's just a joy to be with them, whether it's on the front porch or in the house or in the yard.
It's interesting in our day and age that we have all this electronic stuff that is supposed to improve our communications, but we seem to have lost the art of conversation. Would you agree maybe that has happened?
Definitely. You see people at restaurants texting each other instead of talking to one another. Yeah, I see it all the time, and I'm always wondering what's going to happen to people's communication skills and social skills, because so many people are not one-on-one visiting, whereas the Amish, that's their life. They don't have TV and all the other distractions that we have.
When you really unplug and you really are just face-to-face with a person and you go way beyond the superficial, tell me about how you dig deeper and get to know someone on that level and carry on true communication and conversation with someone.
I think just being willing to open up and share. My husband and I were recently with a young Amish couple who we had never met before, but she knew who I was because so many Amish do know who I am because they read my books. But as we sat and visited, she began to open up and share things with me that most people wouldn't share with a stranger. And I felt very blessed by the fact that she felt comfortable enough to do that. And she trusted me not to write her story. She wasn't asking me to write it. She didn't want me to write it, but she wanted me to pray about it. And just to be able to unburden herself and share what she and her husband had been through.
Takes time to build that kind of trust.
It's just a willingness, I think, to go beyond the surface and past the talking about the weather and politics, to talk about real-life things that we're experiencing.
I'm so glad to hear that you don't include politics in the real-life things, because that seems to be as far as anyone goes these days.
I know. You hear it everywhere. That's the main topic,
And they want to find out what camp you're in, and once they know, they may or may not continue to talk to you.
Exactly. and I'm not saying politics never comes up.
Sure.
Because I remember one time we went in an Amish home to visit. They were friends of ours, and I said to my husband, now, whatever you do, don't talk politics, because the Amish are not going to want to talk politics. And so he said, okay. So we got in there, and I walked past the men. They were gathered, and they were talking politics. I looked at my husband like, he said, I didn't do it. I didn't start it. They did.
That's so great. Well, it takes time, and it takes, to build that kind of trust, it takes a commitment and a commitment to a relationship. And we live in an area where there are many Amish and Mennonite families. We are in that Ohio area.
You've never been there. We have Amish friends in Ohio.
Oh, and isn't it beautiful? We just love it.
Lovely.
But some people are not sure how to begin a friendship. How do you strike up a conversation? Do you have any hints or tips on how to take those first steps to reach out and become friends with someone who dresses and lives entirely different than you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have a lot of reader fans that ask me that question, or they'll say, oh, I went to Amish country, but I didn't talk to any of them because I knew I shouldn't. And I'm just laughing inside because I think these are real people. You can talk to them. They don't bite. They're no different than we are. They dress different, live a different lifestyle, but inside they're like we are. So it's just a matter, and this is what I tell them. Say you go to one of their homes where they have a farm stand where they're selling something. Talk to them about it. Maybe strike up a conversation about something you think that you have here's an example. Somebody was embroidering at a farmer's market, an Amish lady, and I embroider when I have time. And so I struck up a conversation with her about what I'm embroidering and how long when did you learn to embroider, how long have you been doing it, that kind of thing. So find a common ground, something you think that they might, perk up and talk about.
That's so good. Yes, you embroider when you have time because you're pretty prolific in the book writing area. I see that you've written more than 100 books. This is Amish Front Porch is probably different than some of them. In what ways?
Yeah, because they're short stories rather than one long 100,000-word novel, which often goes into a complete series of 3 books. This is one volume, and there's 18 stories, and each of them run around 5,000 to 5,500 words. So it was a little bit of a challenge for me in that I'm writing long. I can usually, take a chapter and spread it out into 3 chapters easily. I had to tell a whole story, and so did my co-authors, my daughter-in-law and granddaughter. They each wrote 4 stories in the collection, and I wrote 10. And so it was fun, but it was also a little bit of a challenge to get it all said in that short amount of time and make an interesting story.
Isn't it? I find the same thing. Why say in 5 words what you can say in 500,000? It's just easier and I think more fun, and probably we might be, in 2 peas in the same pod. What a fun idea to do this with a granddaughter and a daughter-in-law. How did that idea come across? Did you pose that idea to them and they jumped on it? Did they say, hey, we'd love to write with you someday? How did this all come about?
Well, actually, I have been mentoring both of them for a couple of years. Started with my daughter-in-law, and she and I have co-authored a couple of full-length novels. So she was, on board right away. And I think the only thing she was like, how are we going to say it in 5,000 words per story?
Right.
But and my granddaughter has also written with us 2 novella collections. And the novella collections, each story runs around between 20 and 30,000.
Wow.
So she had to learn how to say it in less words, too.
So this was really a challenge to all of you to learn how to, the less is more way of writing.
Well, see, when I first started writing, back when my children were still young and in grade school, I was writing short stories, articles, that type of thing, and that's what I was having published. So I had to bring myself back to that point of, oh, yeah, that's right. I remember how to do this.
So fun. But that, I think, will be fun for us to know that as we're reading these, that these could be way longer, but they're not.
Yes, they could be. And sometimes we're like, oh, boy, I could make this so much longer.
Yeah. But not necessarily better, right?
No, not necessarily, because the stories were told, and they didn't necessarily need to be prolonged. They maybe could have been, but they didn't need to be. And that was the point. And each story has a message. They're fiction stories, but they're based off of real life.
Oh, it was my next question. Did some of these who people have entrusted you with their life stories, are some of these from those conversations?
They're snippets. They're not actually their story, but there's, a little here, a little there kind of thing. Because I don't like to tread lightly. I do tread lightly, I don't like to tread on people's personal lives.
Yes.
And unless they say to me, you can write this story and fictionalize it, I never do. So I just use little bits and pieces. Now, humorous things, that's another story. We have an Amish friend who's very, very humorous. And she'll just say some stuff that's just so funny. And I'll say, oh, can I use that as a scene? It won't be her, but it'll be somebody saying or doing what she said or did.
How great to have those kinds of friendships, to be able to ask and then they give you permission. We have a theater in the area, and the only kinds of plays they do are plays that in some way involve Amish, the Amish way of life, and it's remarkable. They're musicals, they're incredible. any thought that some of your stories might be turned into some kind of a play at some point?
They actually already have.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, and they have played in Sugar Creek at the theater.
Wanda.
Theater you're talking about?
I do.
Yes. Half Stitched is one of them, based off of my Half Stitched Amish Quilting Club novel.
Oh, my.
And more recently was the play called Stolen. And they based it off of 3 books that I had written called The Daughters of Lancaster County. So that was a bit of a challenge for them to combine 3 books and come up with a play that somewhat resembled the theme of my stories.
So you are the famous Wanda Brunstetter. I'm so tickled. Well, okay, now I really want to pick your brain, because how do you do that? First of all, how do you take the horrific experience of a baby being stolen and turn it into entertainment?
Well, you'd have to ask their playwright. Martha Bolton did a fantastic
Yes,
job.
Martha, yes.
And Wally Nason, he can write songs like nobody. I mean, he can put such emotion into his songs, and yet he can also make them light and fun, because they have both. Like a novelist, you want to make your readers laugh and cry and make them wait. And you have to do that in a play or a movie as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done in both of my plays.
And I have never left that theater without crying. It's almost embarrassing.
Well, you're not alone.
It's amazing. So you have visited and you've gotten to see your books turned into scripts and presented. What is that experience like?
It's very exciting. And these plays have been in other towns. They've been in, started in Indiana, and then they were in Sugar Creek, Ohio, and then more recently, Burdenham, PA. And actually this summer, we were in Burdenham, and we got to be there for Stolen. So I have made the rounds. For every time my play has come out, I've always made sure I was there at least once.
Do you ever feel like giving them some notes? Like, this is kind of what I meant? Or have you been thoroughly delighted when you see it?
They usually will ask me after the fact, not during the preliminaries of creating it, but after the play, and when I see it, they'll put me on the spot. What did you think? What do you think we should have done different?
Oh, that's a terrible time to ask.
Yeah, I'm like, well.
You ever had to be diplomatic about it?
Very much so.
Not in Ohio, I'm sure, but maybe in Pennsylvania.
Of course, right?
Right.
The thing is, I knew going into it that they would make some changes. They couldn't follow the script in my book exactly, because in some cases I didn't have humor in places they were able to put it. They could make light of situations. I just couldn't do it in the book. And there was just a number of things. And so as long as the premise is there and as long as the message comes across, that's all I cared about.
I have a playwright's son who says sometimes he watches a film. He's actually a screenwriter. He sees a film that he's written, and he says it's not the same story at all.
Sometimes it isn't.
Right.
I think in the play Half Stitched, that one was kept a little closer to the book than Stolen was. But that was based off one book and not 3, so I can sort of see the point. And plus, in Stolen, the reader, when they're reading the book, they know who did it. Whereas in a play, you can't tell the audience who did it during the opening curtain. They've got to sit there and try to figure it out. It's a mystery. They want to figure out.
Right. It's a different experience than when you're writing the book, reading the book. You want people to get the message. What would be the takeaway, the message, if we could say one message that kind of runs as a thread through all of your works, what would that message be?
All of my works. Is that what you mean? That I've written. It all points to one thing, and that's finding faith in God and allowing Him to use you in whatever talent you have. Some people tell me they don't have talents, but we all do. We just have to look for them. They might not be Picasso painter or whatever, but we all have abilities and things we can give of ourselves to people and to the world. And I think that's my big thing, is everything I write, I want it to be from God. And he's my inspiration, so I want my readers to feel it.
That's a great place to pause. We're going to take a short break and be back with Wanda Brunstetter after these words. You're listening to Our Community.